The following sponsors support public television and Hello Paradise.
Grand Residences, a welcome escape from the hustle and bustle of everyday life, with an array of services, amenities, and surprises. Grand Residences in Cancun, Mexico, sponsored in part by Czech Tourism. The heart of Europe, the land of stories. Czech Tourism is a proud sponsor of KVCR.
Los Arboles Hotel, located in the Palm Springs Historic Movie Colony District. Tiled floored rooms, a courtyard pool, jacuzzi, event spaces, and El Mirasol Cocina Mexicana restaurant. LosArbolesHotel.com.
Hi, I'm Joni Ravenna, and this is Hello Paradise, where we take you throughout Southern California and sometimes even out of the country to show you all of the best things to do, places to go, food to taste, and people to meet. All of that and a whole lot more on this episode of Hello Paradise. There sure are a lot of beautiful golf courses throughout Southern California, and especially here in the Coachella Valley. But you'll be interested to find out there are a whole lot of things to do out here in the desert. Take a look. And now Brian Ellis, the maitre d' at Melvin's in Palm Springs, is going to regale us with some great old Hollywood stories at the historic Ingleside Inn.
Hello, Joni. Welcome to Melvin's restaurant here at the Ingleside Inn. My name is Brian Ellis. I've been the maitre d' here at Melvin's since 1975 when we first opened. And we're here on a Sunday afternoon at the Ingleside Inn Melvin's Restaurant Lounge, where we're going to listen to some great music on our jam session that we've been doing now for the last 18 years from 3:30 to 7:30. We have great musicians, great singers, some great talent. Why don't we just take a stroll and listen to some music? Well, Joni, for all the years that we've been in business, we've been very, very privileged and honored to have waited and served some of the top dignitaries in our world, both politically and in show business. And I just want to share a couple of stories with you. Governor Schwarzenegger, he used to stay here a lot with his ex-wife and dine in the restaurant a lot. And he used to, back in those days, you could smoke cigarettes, and he used to smoke a cigar. And I had a customer come up to me and says, Brian, you got to do something about this guy. I can't have him smoking cigars in the restaurant. This was a customer telling me this. I says, look at the size of that guy. You think I'm going to tell him he can't smoke a cigar? She says, you go tell him he can't smoke a cigar.
Welcome back to Melvin. How you
doing? There's one other story talking about big celebrities, Hollywood stars, was Marlon Brando. He used to come in back in the 70s and 80s. I went to my boss, Mr. Haber, she wanted to meet Marlon Brando. He says, I would love to. I said, why don't you picture taken? He said, that would be great. So anyway, I took Mr. Haber over to Marlon Brando, and I asked Mr. Brando, would you mind if my boss had his picture taken with? He says, not at all. So I came up to Mr. Haber's office, I got the camera, I went down and I shot about 6 or 7 pictures. Thanked Mr. Brando, who was a sweetheart, and came up, put the camera back in Mr. Haber's office. I go back to the restaurant. Mr. Haber says, go up to the camera and get the film out of the camera. Well, I came up to his office, and there was no film in that camera, and I got to tell you something, I wanted to die. I wanted to get out of here as quick as I could. There was no exit. I had to go down and face Mr. Haber and explain to him, boss, Mr. Haber, there was no film in the camera. So I went down there, ate crow, and I thought he was going to throw me out of the place, but we just laughed about it. We just moved on for the rest of the night. Everyone asks us day in and day out about Frank Sinatra. When Frank Sinatra passed away, we had 6 satellite trucks on our property, and he was just a regular guy. He would come in and hang out at the bar. We would have a lot of dinners here. But I recall one afternoon I get a phone call from a longtime friend of his, Charlie Spatz, wants to do a party for Frank Sinatra at the restaurant. Only one condition. I said, what's that, Mr. Spatz? You don't tell my boss, Mr. Haber. I said, Charlie, I got to tell him he's my boss. He says, no. And I says, why? He says, Mr. Haber will come over to the table and want his picture taken with Frank Sinatra. So I went to Alan Mald, who was my boss at the time. I said, Alan, I got a situation. What is it? I said, Charlie Spatz just called. Frank Sinatra's coming to dinner. We can't tell Mr. Haber. Alan says, don't worry, I'll handle it. About 5 minutes later, I get a call from Mr. Haber in his office up here. And he says, Brian, can you come up and see me? Right then, I knew I was in trouble. Anyway, he came up and he asked me who's coming in tonight. And I says, I can't tell you. He says, why not? Because you're going to bother Mr. Sinatra and you're going to want his picture taken with him all the time. And so that particular night, Mr. Haber didn't come to work. But he's just one of the big celebrities that would come in. It was really funny when Frank would come in and walk into the dining room. There was a certain amount of power and mystique. It was like no other person got the attention that Frank Sinatra got when he came into his restaurant. Well, I'm going to go back in time. Back in the 70s, 80s, we also entertained the Gabor sisters, and that was always amazing because they'd take a round table. Each sister had a makeup case in front of her, a small mirror, and a fan, and they would go through the whole course of the evening after almost each bite, after each course, redoing their makeup, redoing their lipstick, and making sure their hair was perfect. And we used to always have a lot of fun taking care of the Gabor sisters back in the early days. I think maybe we should head back down and listen to a little music at the Sunday Jam session. Well, that's a Sunday afternoon at the Jam Session at Melvin's Restaurant. Joni, back to you.
Thanks, Brian. You're a regular raconteur. That was a great piece. I really loved that. And now you're going to like this upcoming piece, Eat, Drink, and Be Merry.
Hi, I'm Alex Gomez, and we're here at one of our favorite places in downtown Palm Springs, Sammy G's Tuscan Grill, where you get a little bit of that ambience that comes over from Tuscany, and you get great food. Now we're going to be meeting General Manager Sal. Sal?
Hey Alex, how you doing?
Good.
How are you?
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Tell me a little bit about Sammy G's and the ambience that you've created here, similar to what they do in Tuscany.
Well, as you know, in Tuscany, everybody is very welcome. It's a place that you feel like, like you're at home. Mm-hmm. And that's where we try to relate that here, that anybody can come in and feel like, you're just at home, and everybody just mingles around and has a good time. We try to create a package that you can have a fine dining experience. At the same time, we have a beautiful band that you can go to the lounge and have just, everything here in-house.
And I've been in the lounge on a Friday night, and it is really great. Now, the inviting atmosphere that you have here has its roots in Tuscany. Tell me about this great drawer that we have back here.
Well, the door was auctioned in Italy, and my boss, Larry Kramer, who owns the restaurant, bought it from an auction. And it's a 1908 door that was brought down from a church. Beautiful, unique antique door to feature the restaurant as well, with everything that we have here that is very unique, and at the same time make it more homey as possible.
Very nice. I want to take it home with me.
Please.
Now, I also know that Tuscan food has a great blend of herbs and spices with fresh vegetables, and the sauces that are to die for.
Exactly. What we do here is a little bit of everything. As you know, in Tuscany, a lot of herbs and spices are used as well here. But we try to have a combination of seafood, steaks, pasta. It's wonderful.
So when you're in the Southern California area and you come to Palm Springs, make sure to look up Sammy G's and enjoy some of this really great food.
Of interesting people to talk to out here. Check out this next featured interview.
Well, when I was a kid, both my parents were artists. I grew up in this kind of environment, this kind of family. And my father worked for Disney in the early days. He worked for Esquire. Very accomplished guy. My mother was a fashion illustrator. And I figured, well, these guys are just a little too bohemian for me. So I think I'm going to maybe be an attorney. I get to high school, I find out I can do this. I can just do this. The girls like this, it's done deal. My hormones sealed my fate.
The first thing to put Brian on the map were his amazing beach scenes.
I would take giant canvases, put them on the floor, and I would paint right on the floor. And then I'd go back with little tiny squeeze bottles filled with paint, different color paint, and I'd paint above it. So it actually, nothing was touching the canvas at all. And it came out very loose and very free, and it was like an overhead beach scene. It was almost a God's eye view, where you saw the birds coming down, the people playing, and the volleyball players, and the surfers. They were exciting, and they were wonderful, and nobody had done anything like this before.
Brian was recently commissioned by Wayne Family Enterprises to create images of John Wayne. You won't find these images in any of the studio footage. Brian's images of John Wayne are purely from his own imagination.
They were painted on large sheets of aluminum, so the bridles are ground off, so they're shiny. I'll tell you an interesting story. When John Wayne was a kid, he had an Airedale, like my Airedale, Astro. The Airedale's name was Duke, and he would take Duke down to the fire station. And the firemen all knew Duke, but they didn't know John. It was Marion Morrison at the time. So they used to call the dog Little Duke, and they would call him Big Duke. So when I was down at Wayne Enterprises, I was telling them I have an Airedale named Astro. From that time forward, I became Big Astro.
Brian works with aluminum canvas in a way that no other artist does.
You can take the stuff, you can buff it, you can rub it, you can do fantastic things to it. Make it shine when you walk by it. It does things, it'll reach out and grab you. It's a new medium for me, and I think for most people, because what I do is I apply normal subject matter to it. Like painting a woman on aluminum, you're starting with something that's very cold and bringing in something that's warm to it, and the dichotomy is just wonderful. You get this great bounce. But I like aluminum because the stuff is just wonderful. You can grind it, you can polish it, you can rub it, you can do it, anything you want to the stuff. It's virtually bulletproof, and it makes magical things because it changes as you walk by. The Western art right now is an enormous passion for me. I started doing it I've actually been doing it for a long time, but I started doing it seriously a couple of years ago when I found I could paint horses. I've always liked to paint horses anyway, but to make horses have magic is something different entirely. I painted George W. Bush a couple of years ago, and it was a very interesting process because what I did, as opposed to just painting a sitting president, I put him in with Lincoln. Now when you do this, it no longer becomes a picture of the president, it becomes history.
But perhaps what this artist is most well known for is his ability to make a subject appear in a dreamlike setting. For several years, Brian has created special portraits called I Can Make Dreams Come True, wherein he paints an individual in the company of famous people who share a fondness or appreciation of something special.
It's a memory that you can keep forever. You can't get it anywhere else. A great deal of what I do is commission work. Companies come to me looking for ways to think different than their art departments. A lot of the big companies come to me, and I'll tell you what, they have art departments with guys who came out of Disney, Hanna-Barbera, and they're all terrific artists. But what do they want me for? Because they need a fresh view, and that's one of the ways that I look at things. I've worked with BMW, Porsche, Bentley, RJ Reynolds, Coca-Cola. I've worked with most of the big corporations throughout the world. In-N-Out has got to be one of the most interesting accomplishments I ever did. How it happened was Rich Schneider, a very good friend of mine, and one of the founders of In-N-Out, came to me one day, this has got to be 15 years ago at least, and said, Michael, I want to create something really good on the t-shirts. And I said, well, wow, you really? Because you got truck drivers. He said, no, I want to give them something really great. So I said, okay. And we sat down and they came up with an image for In-N-Out, and they sold way more shirts than they ever did before. And then I did it the year after and the year after. And the numbers kept going up and up and up. What's funny is I've painted presidents, I've painted princes, I've done the Olympics, I've done Grand Prix. Everybody knows me as the hamburger guy. That will be my legacy.
Well, that was an interesting piece. Now let's take a look at our Desert Cities report.
Hi, I'm Paulina Sussman, and on this week's Desert Cities report, our focus will be on something that is not often spoken of: teen suicide. I will be speaking to Jessica Vanderstead of the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. She will be telling us not only some of the ways to spot the warning signs, but also ways to prevent it. Let's go speak to her now. Jessica, how did you become involved in the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention?
I am actually a survivor of suicide, and when we talk about being a survivor of suicide, it's anyone who's impacted by suicide. So I lost my father in 2008, and my father battled a long battle with depression, and after he took his own life, I became really involved in the foundation, first as a volunteer and then later as the area director. And I became involved in the foundation because it personally touched me. I had never experienced any of the emotions that I felt when I lost my dad to suicide. The anger, the guilt, I wish I could have done something, maybe I should have done something, and becoming involved in the foundation helped me realize that, one, there was nothing I could have done, and two, that his death doesn't have to be the end, that I can use what I've gone through to help other people.
Is the incidence of teen suicide rising or dropping at the moment?
Teens actually have a growing rate of suicide within the Coachella Valley as nationwide. Currently, it's the third leading cause. Now, when we're talking about teen suicide, we're also relating it to other non-natural causes of death. And interestingly enough, teen suicide has almost an equal rate of the number of teens who take their own lives as the number of teens that we're losing on the increasingly busy highways.
What are some of the warning signs of suicide?
Some of the actually key warning signs when we're talking about preventing suicide, are depression and sadness. Depression is actually the leading cause of suicide. Almost 90% of the people who die by suicide have underlying mental illness, most often depression. Now, there's other key warning signs to look for as well, especially when we're talking in regards to teens. That can include separating themselves from friends and family, distancing themselves from school or things that they usually typically enjoy doing, and basically a drastic change in behavior can be a key warning sign when we're talking about mental illness and suicide.
How can students or just people in general become involved in your organization?
Well, the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, AFSP, is a national organization, so no matter where you are, you can always find a local chapter to get involved with.
What are some of the typical things that people misunderstand about suicide?
Suicide actually has a huge stigma. The main thing that people misunderstand is that the leading cause of suicide is mental illness. And like any other disease out there, cancer, AIDS, mental illness is treatable and it is preventable. And that's the main stigma we work in breaking, is that suicide is treatable and it is preventable. It is not something you can snap out of and get over.
Thank you, Jessica. You've been so helpful and very enlightening. This is Paulina Sussman, and this has been your Desert Cities Report.
And now from the golf course at Eagle Falls, we're off for our getaway to go snow skiing. It's still here in Southern California, about 2 hours in that direction, up in the San Bernardino Mountains. Nestled in a cozy spot off the Sierras is Big Bear Mountain, an insanely serene and beautiful resort town that caters to the travelers of all kinds. Those who long for the peace and quiet that can only be found while fishing on the lake, and those who are looking for something entirely different. With lakes and mountains to quench every skier's thirst, you can take your choice of several snow skiing resorts, but we found the most popular right here. This is Snow Summit Ski Resort, normally a great place to ski whether you're a beginner, intermediate, or expert. But today, if you're not world class, then get off the slopes because Snow Summit is hosting the U.S. Pro Ski Tour. And let me tell you, these guys are good. The competitions consist of slalom and giant slalom racing, and with a purse of $80,000, the racers pull out all the stops. The number one ranked contender this year is Austrian-born Bernard Naus. Seen here in one of today's runs, Bernard knows what it takes to be the best.
To be the best skier on the US Pro Tour, it takes a lot, you know. You have to train very hard in the summer and you have to be talented as a skier, and you have to be strong in your mind, in your head, you know, because that's the most important thing, and that's what pro skiing is all about. Everything is, I would say 80% is just in your head, you know. You have to be very quick in the starting gate and then making 10 runs in one day without any mistakes. This slope here is very good for a slalom, but just a little bit too flat for a giant slalom. But I like it here because the weather is always nice.
But the weather is just one of the pluses to skiing here. Snow Summit has 230 acres of skiable terrain, with 40% catering to the intermediate skier. Top elevation is 8,200 feet with a vertical drop of 1,200 feet. And with a total of 11 chairlifts, this hill can transport over 17,000 skiers per hour. All of these statistics add up to one great time on the slopes, whether you're a pro or an amateur, as top-ranked American contender Felix McGrath will attest.
Away in the red course, Ormsby on the blue. Can he put the pressure on here in the last section of the course? Over the second bump, it's Cheeseman with the lead. Cheeseman from Slovenia on the red, Ormsby the American on the blue. Looking to Ormsby starting to really pour on it.
Losing is always disappointing, but when you beat yourself is when it's really hard to handle. And what I mean by that is, like, if you get nervous, if you don't ski your game, if your opponent forces you into an error. But if you just get beat because your opponent's better than you, there's no reason to hang your head. I mean, sure, you're disappointed, but you move on to the next race. Well, Snow Summit's a great place for a ski vacation. I'm pretty surprised because I haven't been here in about 10 years, since I was an amateur. And it's a great facility. This close to the city, Los Angeles, it's unbelievable. If you wanted to, you could surf and ski on the same day.
Best snow ever.
Well, as you can see, Big Bear Snow Summit has the hottest things on 2 skis. Well, that about does it for us from Southern California. This is Joni Ravenna, and I'll see you on the next Hello Paradise.
Joni's hair provided by Heads Up Hair Design, located at 460 South Palm Canyon Drive in Palm Springs. Heads Up is a full-service salon and day spa, located in the heart of downtown Palm Springs.
Grand Residences, a welcome escape from the hustle and bustle of everyday life, with an array of services, amenities, and surprises. Grand Residences in Cancun, Mexico. Sponsored in part by Czech Tourism. The heart of Europe, the land of stories. Czech Tourism is a proud sponsor of KVCR.
The Desert Entertainer proudly supports public television and KVCR.